in California, United States, and the world. We are at critical times, as you know. The word crisis, it comes from the Chinese Mandarin word, which has two parts to it: danger and opportunity. Crisis means danger and opportunity. So we face a lot of dangers today with the economy as it is in the United States and California and the world, where millions of people are unemployed or underemployed. Lots of hope seems to be gone about what will happen in their future of their lives and their children's lives. At the same time, this crisis with these hurdles and these obstacles can be overcome with opportunity. And we have the opportunity now to remake our system in a wonderfully new way. We can reform it, structural reform included, to make it much more amenable and helpful to the common person, the regular folks in the 99%. As occupied brought us that consciousness that the 1% and 99% are living two different kinds of lives, basically, and we need to take a look at where are the 99%? How are they feeling about life right now? What are their prospects for opportunity to get ahead in life, to be able to get and fulfill their full potential? And this is the crisis that we face here in the United States and the world. It is a global crisis because, you know, the whole economy is connected now through outsourcing, through cheap labor markets where many big businesses, multinational corporate businesses are, a drop of a pin, they will just jump ship and go overseas and open up factories in third world countries, in Ecuador, in El Salvador, in Honduras, in countries like China, which pay only a little over $1 an hour for the iPhone workers to assemble those iPhones in their huge factories in China. A little over $1 an hour. Those of you using iPhones, and in fact, it's all the cell phones are built the same way with different contractors in similar conditions. In China, for example, the contractor which Apple hires pays their workers a little over $1 an hour, has the workers working for 10 to 11 hours a day, 7 weeks in a row in order to get a project done, and many times it is just unbearable, and the workers are becoming so disillusioned in those conditions and situations that, matter of fact, as I point out in my book that I just wrote recently, Dollar Democracy with Liberty and Justice for Some, How to Reclaim the American Dream for All, I mentioned one chapter specifically when I quoted several of the workers there who were in such dire conditions they considered committing suicide many times. And in fact, for a while, there was a rash of suicides where some of the workers in those factories assembling iPhones actually jumped to their death from the fifth floor dormitory where they were living. The dormitories had 12 workers in one dormitory, the night shift and day shift together. So this is a condition that we used to have in the 1890s in this country, in England, in the so-called first world countries, the developed countries today. These countries were very underdeveloped, developed and maldeveloped in the wrong way for the top 1%. The Carnegies, the Mellons, the Rockefellers in this country, the DuPonts, these are the folks who climbed to the top in the 1800s, based mainly off of the back of everyone else who worked so hard in the factories, along with child labor. In the 1890s, 1880s in the United States, we had child labor until it was finally abolished in this country. But prior to that, children were going to work as young as the age of 10 or 14, even younger than that sometimes, not in school. They had to go along with their parents to go to the factory and work there from dawn till dusk because the parents were not making enough money to make ends meet. So the children went along for a meager wage, even less than their parents. And people like the Carnegies and Rockefellers didn't mind. They said, listen, this is work. We're offering you work. Take the work or leave it. We're giving you a job. Be satisfied. Be grateful. This is the kind of attitude that still exists today in much of the world, in the global south, so-called third world, but the correct term is global south. The southern developed, underdeveloped countries, or maldeveloped, overexploited countries. I just mentioned a few of them already, where the sweatshops are located. It is still going on today. The same things that happened 150 years ago in this country and in Britain and parts of Europe are happening today. Of course, we know sometimes there are sweatshops we run across in parts of Los Angeles that are kind of hidden and occasionally be discovered. So this is just not right. And we're looking at this issue of social and economic justice and how do we fix that. And here the presidential candidates, the leading ones, are talking about their personal lives, about terrible, videotapes that surface that show, egregious sexual behavior and all kinds of things that, well, we have to not acknowledge they are an issue, especially we're talking about in the case of Donald Trump, where the videotape surfaced about how he talked about women in a misogynistic way. And then you have Trump bringing in Bill Clinton and how his flings with women and trying to link that to Hillary in some way or the other. This is despicable that all we're focusing on these things. I mean, it's important to set the record straight and to show that women in America must be respected. Women all over the world must be expected as equals, as people with dignity, just like men. Together, they both, as the Chinese proverb says, women hold up half the sky, and yet we're not giving them the credit. So complete equality for women. We should be talking about that and decrying and condemning what Trump has said and what Bill Clinton allegedly has done. And other people, not just those two. We should all look at ourselves, look in the mirror. We've done things that were not so good in terms of not always treating our fellow human being equally as we should have, as well as we should. So we need to look at these things and see how we can fix them. But we should focus in this election on other major issues, including the issue of pay inequity, unequal pay for women for the same work, unequal wages for people who are in global south countries that don't even come close to what we make over here. For example, when Microsoft takes a job to India to hire Indian computer scientists who have PhDs in computer science to write the Microsoft software in Hyderabad, the southern part of India, they've exported much of our software production from here to a third world country like India, where the wages are much lower and highly educated workforce is able to produce this material for Microsoft, and it's instantaneous commerce. It doesn't take forever to send over a new program to the United States. It's electronic transfer, right? So they can actually hire workers outside the US, pay these computer engineers and computer scientists 1/4 the wage that they pay the American. For example, an American graduate in computer science who would be hired by Microsoft to write software here in this country would be getting paid at least $80,000 to start with, more like six figures, 100,000 or more. The problem is the same type of work can be done in India by an English-speaking Indian computer scientist for $20,000 to $25,000 a year. That's exactly what Microsoft is taking advantage of, just as Apple has hired those Chinese workers to assemble those phones for a little over $1 an hour. This is the exploitation of people around the world, people that we in America say should be treated with human dignity, because our Constitution, our Declaration of Independence requires that. It talks about all human beings being created equal. And we talk about human dignity in the Western philosophical sense of every one of us having a spark of the divine within each of us. We should respect each other fully as part of the same human family. And yet, when our businesses go overseas, not just our businesses, corporate owners from around the world, the multinational corporations go overseas, and they hire people for this wages that cannot even be called a living wage, and treat people with indignity. So this is just not right, and that's what the show is about, is try to point out some of these discrepancies, more than discrepancies, point out these egregious offenses that are hurting humankind all over the world. So we can fix that. But let's start here at home. Let's start right now with the issues of women who work in hotels, in the industry, as people who are taking care of the rooms in hotels. Hotel workers, for example, they've suffered wage theft and wage reductions and not full pay. And when they do get paid at such low wages, it's way below $15 an hour, which would be a bit more of a livable wage to some extent. Even that's not enough. If we actually raise minimum wage according to inflation, from the 1970s to now, we would be paying minimum wage workers about $18 to $20 an hour. That's what the minimum wage would be worth today from 1970s. And let me tell you something. I made the minimum wage when I was in college. I was making minimum wage of $1.65 an hour back in the 1970s, the mid-70s. $1.65 an hour selling shoes in a clothing store with 2% commission, which came out to $2 an hour. And I was able to pay for not only my room and board in a 3-bedroom house with 2 other guys who are roommates of mine in college. I could pay for my own room and share the house for $40 a month rent. I could also pay for gasoline, which was 21 cents a gallon in Dallas, Texas. I went to school in Denton, 30 miles from Dallas, 21 cents a gallon. I bought my car for a couple $100, paid off, no loan. I was able to save the money and pay it off in one summer. And so we had textbooks that were $10 a textbook, maybe $15 at the most in the college classes. Our tuition was $100 a semester, service fee in Texas. There was no tuition, basically $100 tuition if you want to call it that, or $100 fee, whatever you want to call it. It's all that we paid. It's $100 for 15 units of classes undergraduate. In grad school, it was actually free because I actually had to work as a teaching assistant. I was able to get money to do the work by grading papers of professors. I was able to go through and realize the American dream, my on the road to it, within less than 6 years with my master's degree. 2 bachelor's degrees and a master's degree in less than 6 years. Today, our young people are struggling to get by to get a bachelor's degree in a 4-year period. The average graduate time now to graduate with a 4-year degree at UC is more like 5 years. And the same thing at Cal State's, because many students have to go to work, they have to drop out, they can't afford the rent, they can't afford the cost of gas and cars and transportation, and the textbooks are so outrageously priced. I mean, one textbook can be over $100 in college classes now. So these big companies are making a lot of money, the textbook publishers. This is a system that we have to bring under control. We have to overcome the crisis We have to get through the danger and use the opportunity to create more social justice. And it's going to have to come through political activism, through getting involved in demonstrating, agitating, educating, protesting peacefully, and then linking hands and arms with legislators who are progressive, some of whom are progressive, a fraction are progressive in the legislature of California and the Congress. You find people such as a Bernie Sanders in the Senate. You find Elizabeth Warren in the Senate. You find in the Congress and the House of Representatives, you have someone like Marcy Kaptur out of Ohio. You had someone like Dennis Kucinich out of Ohio. These are the progressives who did not take corporate money. They're not bought by the special interest lobbyists, and they're fighting the good fight. Keith Ellison, the congressman from Minnesota, he's the chair of the Progressive Caucus. These are the progressives who are not bought off by the corporations. They're only a handful out of the hundreds of members of Congress. Most of the members of Congress have taken big money. It costs $1.7 trillion on the average to run for the House and to win the election these days. And the incumbents all win the elections about 95% of the time because they raise $1.7 million, $1.7 million every 2 years. That money is coming not from your mom and pop grocery store or your neighbor who give you a $10 contribution. That money is coming from well-heeled special interest political action committees or lobbyists with the committees from various special interest groups such as the American Petroleum Association and all kinds of associations such as that, Pharmaceutical Association, and so many other special interest lobbying groups that actually have a lot of funds to put into the political arena by donating to campaigns and then expecting votes later on. They cannot make a quid pro quo or a direct exchange for a vote. They cannot donate to a campaign and say, Mr. Member of Congress, Ms. Member of Congress, vote for this bill that I'm sponsoring, that I'd like you to sponsor for me and for our industry because it's better for us. Vote for it, we'll give you campaign money. They cannot say that. That's a quid pro quo. It is illegal. It'll land them both in jail, the lobbyist and the member of Congress. So that's what I'm saying. There's more of an understanding, an unwritten understanding, that as they raise this money for these members of Congress, eventually the Congress members will deliver with about 80% of the time voting in their favor. And this has been studied by political scientists. This is a major problem of pay to play, as we call it. This has to be hit head on and changed and knocked out completely so we can have a clean money election system where the public has the major say in who gets funded what, like they have in Maine and Arizona and other states now, a few other states. They've adopted clean money elections. If I were to run for office in Arizona, let's say, well, Arizona or Maine, let's take Maine's example, for example. In Maine, the state of Maine, all you have to do is, if you want to run for state assembly, as long as you're eligible, you're the right age limit, you're a U.S. citizen, you're a resident of Maine, all you have to do is collect $5 nominating fee from 65 people in your district who are registered voters, $5 each, comes out to about $320 something. Once you collect those nominating fees, you turn over the $300 something to the Maine State Election Commission that runs the election system there. And then right away, you sign a pledge saying you will not raise private money or accept private money, and you will not even spend your own private money for your campaign. And therefore, you become a clean money candidate, and they put you on the ballot. The Election Commission puts you on the ballot automatically, and then the state of Maine writes you a check as a candidate for office to run your campaign, several $1,000s to reach several thousand voters in your district. And this is how it works. So that way you get the check from the people of Maine, and you don't have to worry about raising money or begging special interests for money and get bought by them. You serve the people because the people are sponsoring you, and you are right with the people. You can campaign day to day during the campaign season without having to get on the phone half the day and make phone calls to rich people and have fundraiser with lobbyists. None of that's not even needed in Maine anymore. That's why 80% of the Maine legislature was elected clean money back in 1998 when it was first introduced. And believe me, today it's about 70% of the state of Maine's legislature elected with clean money, not bought by special interest money. That's why Maine became the first state back in the late 90s, early 2000s to introduce a universal health care plan that was implemented in Maine, because the legislators were not bought off by the lobbyists from the health insurance industry, from the HMO industry, from the pharmaceutical industry. They were not bought off. They were serving the people because the people sponsored them, and they could campaign directly with the people. If we can do this in the state of Maine, it's a fairly small state population-wise, size-wise it's pretty medium-sized. We can do it here in California. We can do it in Arizona. We can do it in Massachusetts. We can do it in Texas. In fact, Vermont has some of its elections sponsored as clean money elections to allow an option of public financing. It's called voluntary public financing of elections, which allows the candidate to be free of special interests. This is what we need if we want to overcome the crisis of the growing gap between rich and poor, of the lack of schools, adequate schools in our country, unequal schools. Our public schools are tremendously unequal because in 1/3 of our schools or so, You have low-income school districts that only spend $7,000 or $8,000 per student, and the high-income districts, such as Marin County, they're spending close to $18,000 per student. In states like New York, it's $17,000 per student in the school districts there in public schools. In California, it's only $9,000 on the average, statewide average. So you have major disparities. A big difference between a school that spends $17,000 per student, such as the one in Marin County, and the school in Southgate, right here in Los Angeles County, lower income area. It's based on property taxes. That's the problem. The school funding is based mostly on property taxes. So low income areas have low income property values. There's less dollars coming in. And the folks in Southgate in their schools have to put up with only $7,500 per person, per pupil. $7,500 per pupil compared to $17,000 or $18,000 in Marin County. In Palo Alto, $14,000. In New York, the average statewide is $17,000. So big disparities here. I'm sure you can fund all the computer and science labs at $18,000 per student. You can have all the arts classes that you want, all the after-school programs that you want, and this is a tremendous boon to the top 1/3 of our population, or even a smaller number at the very top who live in the affluent districts. We need to make sure the middle class and the working poor in America are given opportunities. As the old adage says, if you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. If you teach him how to fish, he eats for a lifetime. That's what this should be about. The American concept of public education, free of charge, kindergarten through university, as we had in California. Let me remind the audience again, those of you who didn't hear it last time. In California from 1960, the Master Plan for Higher Education brought in by Governor Pat Brown, the present governor's father. The Master Plan guaranteed tuition-free education. It went through for at least 20 years before it was gradually but surely dismantled to where now the students are paying outrageous amounts of tuition fees, and we didn't have to do that. When I was teaching in California, my students didn't have to do that back in the 70s and 80s. They were paying virtually nothing in tuition. So this is our equal opportunity we're talking about here, and that's what this show is going to be about. In every single area of our lives, it's going to be in the area of the economy, of social justice, and also of environmental justice. So we can touch on the subject as we go along this week, okay? Right now we should talk about what are the plans for Hillary Clinton and or Donald Trump or Jill Stein or Gary Johnson, the Libertarian candidate. Jill Stein is the candidate of the Green Party. There are 4 candidates at least running, and yet we only hear of 2 of them. Well, even when we do hear from the 2, we don't get a comprehensive, succinct, and clear-cut plan that they have that we could see and compare. You know, where is Donald Trump on taxes? Whose taxes is he going to cut? Whose is he going to have to increase, or how much money he's going to have to borrow because he's going to cut all these taxes, especially on rich people? What is Hillary Clinton's plan to tax the rich a bit more? She talked about it. What number, what income level is she going to hit harder? What about the corporate loophole she spoke about, which she borrowed from Bernie Sanders about closing the corporate loopholes? What has she said about which loopholes? How about she starts talking about some specific loopholes to bring the money in and tell us how much money can she bring in that way? How much money can Donald Trump bring in if he's going to be giving the store away to the rich people mostly in tax cuts and driving up the deficit again? These plans, the debates were just horrendously inadequate. All they focused on was the personal attacks, and we're just sick and tired of it, we American people. We want real plans for our country because this is our country. It's our children's country. My daughter is 4.5 years old. She'll be 5 actually next month. So she is starting out for the first time in public school. And we got to make sure that she has a chance to be able to do well in a good public school, which is a decent school that we are sending her to right now. But yet, in our own public school, the parents have to write checks and raise money to keep the computer and science labs open. The computer and science lab were threatened to be closed down about 7 or 8 years ago, and the parents in our area, since we had some money compared to other areas, were able to write checks and also set up lemonade stands to raise money that way. I saw a lemonade stand with a couple of kids and mom, and they told me they're raising money for the science and computer labs at the school. So this is something that's just unconscionable, that we have to have parents rely on raising their own money like that. What about the parents that cannot afford to write those checks a few miles away in another part of Long Beach? It's very tremendously problematic because those parents aren't able to keep their computer lab or science lab open if they have one on campus. This is not right, folks. It's not really public education. It's a hybrid education. One of my friends called it a hybrid education. His children go to the same schools. He says they have to raise private money to complement the public money that's being cut. So this is not a fully funded public education system, even K through 12. Okay, let's go ahead. I think it's about time now to take phone calls from the audience. We said we'd have people call at 7:15. We're probably a bit past our time. So anyone who'd like to pick up the phone numbers right there on the screen, 562-438-0505. 562-438-0505. Please give us a call and we can talk about any of these issues or other issues that you might have you'd like us to focus on tonight. We have till 7:30. Please give us a call when you can. Okay? 562-438-0505. Oh, looks to me like there's a call coming in right now. Hello, you're on with Peter Mathews. Who's this, please?
Yeah, hi, this is Frank calling.
Yes, hello, Frank. How are you?
All right.
Yes, what's on your mind tonight? What would you like to talk about?
Talk about this poll numbers and stuff.
The polling numbers in the presidential election you're talking about. The campaigns.
Yeah, and why they're so different.
That's an excellent idea. Excellent point you're making, Frank. Why are the polls so different from each other, even some of the big name mainstream polls? For example, the ABC News poll that just came out today showed that in that poll of likely voters, their selection of likely voters, each poll selects its own likely voters. Whatever it is, according to them, the sample of voters that represent the whole United States, ABC said, out of that sample, it showed that on election, if the election were held today, that Hillary Clinton would win the election by 12 points more than Donald Trump in the popular vote. Nationwide popular vote, she's 12 points ahead of Donald Trump today. And yet again, a poll that just came out at the same time, pretty much, the CNN poll said that Hillary Clinton is leading Donald Trump today by 4 points. 4 points instead of 12. And there was another poll that touted itself as the most accurate poll in the last several elections. It's called the Investors Business Daily Poll. And that poll showed that Donald Trump was ahead by 1 point ahead of Hillary Clinton among likely voters. There are the two other polls that show Donald Trump tied or ahead. The Rasmussen poll and the LA Times USC poll show Donald Trump tied or ahead. And Hillary Clinton has many other polls showing her way ahead of Donald Trump. So why are these polls so different from each other? Do you have any thoughts about that, Frank? What do you think it is? I can probably illuminate that a little bit if you... Let's hear from you first.
Well, I think that the kind of sampling that they do, maybe the questions the way they ask, and things like that that they're not aware of. Each polling company has their own model that they follow.
Okay, so you're saying that the sampling is different from one polling company to the other. Sample of voters that they bring in to a question on the phone. For example, some of them, one polling company may say, likely voters means voters who voted in 4 of the last 4 elections. Others may say the likely voters are those who voted in 2 of the last 4 elections. Is that right?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And those are polling different kinds of people, different types of voters, and saying that they're all likely voters. This is the reason for some of the discrepancies among these polls. You're absolutely correct. So how do we really know who's ahead, who's behind, by how much? And many of folks are saying we cannot trust the polls 100%. Don't forget there's also margins of error. All polls have a margin of error, which says that the poll is accurate up to, say, 3.6% margin of error, which means that the poll could be lying on either side of that within about 6 points difference. The poll may say that Hillary is ahead by 4 points, but if the margin of error is 3.6 points, that means she could only be leading Donald Trump by maybe 0.4 points, 0.4. Or she could be leading him by a full 4 points. So it's very difficult, or maybe more than 4 points. It's difficult to say if the polling has been done accurately. You can go by the various polls' past records. You look to see how accurate they were using their sampling techniques and their tracking poll techniques for the last, say, 3 or 4 elections. You'd probably want to try to go with an average of polls as well. That's what the Real Clear Politics site does. It averages about 7 or 8 polls from leading polling names. So that's a good point, Frank, and therefore people should not rely so much only on the polls. Am I right?
Exactly. Otherwise, you're going to feel so comfortable, you may not go out there to vote, and you could help elect Donald Trump.
So, for example, this ABC poll that says that Hillary is ahead by 12 points or ahead of Trump could make some of the Hillary voters feel pretty comfortable. Like, oh, I don't have to really vote. Enough people are out there going to vote anyway. What's the point in voting, right? And this is going to be could be a real problem for her. What about some of these, the third party and the fourth party? I would not even like to call them third and fourth. Basically, they're the smaller parties. They haven't had the exposure on television to get their ideas out. We wouldn't know if their ideas are popular or not until they have full national exposure. They have not been able to because those parties have much less funding than the Democratic or Republican Party and much less visibility. the Green Party of Dr. Jill Stein, and the Libertarian Party of Gary Johnson. So what would you say to people who would say that they want to vote their conscience and their mind and their heart by choosing one of those two candidates because that's who they believe comes closest to their ideas? What would you say to them about not choosing one of the two major candidates, Frank? Can you explain that to the audience, please?
Well, right now, things are so
Can you speak up a little bit, please? Speak up a little bit.
Right now, things are so critical between what's going on between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. We should all vote for her. And if you believe in the ideal of the other two parties, after the election, you go on and do some volunteer work for them or get them exposed in the national conscience. That way, you're still helping them, but right now we can't, kind of carry our votes to these folks right now.
So you would urge the people who might want to vote out of their own conscience for Jill Stein or Gary Johnson to hold off, you're saying, till after the election, then campaign for them to get them stronger for the next election. And meanwhile, this election, you want everyone to commit to either Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. And your choice is who out of the two?
Oh, I want to vote for Hillary Clinton, of course.
Your choice is Hillary Clinton all the way. So you want these folks that support third parties to come aboard and vote for Hillary, you're saying?
Well, yeah, because the fact is they're not going to win. And secondly, you're risking the chance of Donald Trump winning.
Okay, many people do make that argument. However, what about the argument that if you don't vote for them, they will never win? They will never win. And so what's the point in just giving your vote to someone you don't really believe in?
Look, I believe in two parties, maybe third parties, but third parties usually end up creating a situation where your party could lose, depending on who that third party is siphoning votes from, whether Democrats or Republicans. And that's what my concern is, because then all three parties are not representing the majority; they're just representing 1/3 of the voters.
Mm-hmm.
Which may not be what we want in a democracy.
Okay, let's see if there's someone.
Look at like, for example, in England, you have a parliamentary system where you can have in the parliament different parties, and they have to form a coalition.
Right. That's a whole different system. That's a different. It's proportional representation. You're speaking of proportional representation system in Germany, in Israel, in parts of Italian elections are that way. In England, they have single member plurality. It's a parliamentary system, you're right. But the proportional representation is the one that can actually give smaller parties a chance to rise to the national stage by winning a few seats to parliament or to Congress, right? We don't have that system here, you're saying, and therefore people should not take a chance on voting for one of the third parties in your view. But let me go ahead and hang up with you for right now and see if anyone wants to call in and give us a viewpoint on advocating that people should vote their conscience for a third party or a fourth or fifth, whatever other party there is, based on their beliefs, whether the party has their same values or not. But Frank, I can understand what you're saying, though. From your point of view, I can see why you would feel that way. Other people may not feel that way. They may feel like if you vote for the lesser of two evils, from their point of view, you're going to get evil, one way or the other. You're going to get an inadequate response from those you do elect out of the two major parties. And the two major parties may take for granted those who vote for them out of being forced to do so, out of fear that a third party vote might cause the wrong person to win. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Okay, let's go. Is it okay, Frank? Anything else before I let you go?
No, that's good for the point.
Thank you so much for that point of view. Let me get off the phone here with you and then see if someone would call in and give us a different point of view on voting for Jill Stein or Gary Johnson if they believe they should. Okay? Frank is off the phone, so if anyone else wants to call in, the phone is available, the phone line. So if you'd like to call in, will they come another call? Excellent. Okay, I like this participation. Who's speaking, please? Oh, could you please speak up a little bit, sir? Speak up a little bit because the volume seems kind of low here. Yeah, there we go. That's much better. I think it'll be picked up now. Go right ahead. You were saying your name is Brett, and what were you calling about, Brett?
Okay, I'm from Long Beach.
Uh-huh.
Not too far from your place, I think.
Okay.
You're close. I really respect the other callers' ideas, but I've got a different idea. I was really surprised. I went online and I found out Bernie Sanders spoke, he's been campaigning for Hillary Clinton. He's kind of lukewarm on his support of her, but he says, of course, he wants to keep the Democrats back in power. I'm personally not so interested in the Democrats or the Republicans' power. At this point, because Hillary Clinton is, as far as I'm concerned, everything points to her being a crook.
Being a what?
A crook.
Okay, I think we heard you. Go ahead.
I might be maybe pissing a few people off by saying that, but, and I respect.
Well, politics tends to get people a little upset sometimes. You're right. Go ahead.
Yeah, and but I still can't find myself voting for Donald Trump either. There's a lot of questions about him, and well, my take on it is I believe Hillary's going to win anyway.
You believe Hillary's going to win?
I mean, that's just my point of view. I think she's going to win.
Okay. What makes you think that? Is the polling? Are you looking at the polls or what?
Yeah, I'm looking at the polls. I mean, it's basically they're running neck and neck. It's kind of a well, I hate to use the term, a crapshoot. Who's gonna win?
But what makes you think Hillary's going to win, though? You said you think that Hillary's going to win, even though it's a close race in your view.
Yeah.
What makes you think Hillary's going to win?
Well, partly because she's gotten this far, and she's gotten past all the the voter fraud stuff, and that's still going on, by the way. I think she's just kind of a selected person. I think even the Republicans would rather have her in office.
You said the Republicans would rather have Hillary in office than?
Yeah.
Than whom?
Than Donald Trump.
Than Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is not getting the support of some of the Republican leaders. Is that right?
That's right.
Very unusual, isn't it, Brett, for someone who's a major party nominee not to be getting the support of some of the top leaders in his own party, like the Speaker of the House. He's not getting the full support of Paul Ryan. In fact, I think Paul Ryan, didn't he withdraw the endorsement?
I believe so.
He certainly is not coming out full force for his man, for Trump and his party. Paul Ryan is the top leader in the Republican Party, and he's not coming out full force endorsing and campaigning with Trump. In fact, he disinvited Trump from one of his events when the videotape surfaced about Trump and Trump's statements about misogyny. So this is a major, unusual situation. So that's what makes you think that Hillary's going to win this. You're pretty sure, looking at the tea leaves, looking at all the atmospherics, you're seeing that Hillary's going to do it. You say she's going to win this.
Atmospheric, yeah.
Ah.
Look at the weather vane.
Look at the weather vane. The atmospherics. Yeah.
It's blowing one way one moment, and it blows the next way the next.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
So I just, for my own, Bernie Sanders, I still love the guy. And he said something very simple. I believe Ross Perot said it many years ago, and he lost. But he said, vote your conscience. And that's what I do. That's what I do when I
vote your conscience. You're saying that Bernie Sanders said vote your conscience, and also Ross Perot said that a few years ago.
Yes. And
okay.
I voted for Ross Perot.
And that's what you want to do, is vote your conscience this time?
I think, yeah. And I'm siding with Jill Stein.
You're siding with Jill Stein because that's what your conscience tells you to do. Interesting, folks. A different approach from the two people that called. And it's very interesting and instructive to see how their different takes on what this election is about, how to win it, who should win it, what should be the criteria in terms of why we vote for who we do. Different opinions here on the two sides that we just heard. I'm sure there may be a third or fourth side. Thank you, Brett. Are you pretty much, anything else you'd like to say before I hang up to let someone else call, possibly?
Well, I don't want anyone else to call.
You don't want anyone else to call. There may be a third opinion there on it. I would like to hear that. But go ahead and finish up what you have to say. Because it's almost 7:30, actually. It's after 7:30. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, maybe I better go and let someone else.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. You got a minute or two.
Oh, well, my thought about it is, I really like Jill Stein to begin with. I think she was pretty much my choice after Bernie dropped out anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And I started looking at the other candidates. Not too much information on her or Gary Johnson. I know
That's
that
true.
Gary was running a little ahead of her, which concerned me because I don't really appreciate a lot of Gary's views. But if people want to vote for him, that's fine.
Okay.
As far as the race is concerned, it's really coming down to the wire.
Oh, we're 2 weeks away. Tomorrow is the 2 weeks from tomorrow is the election day, isn't it?
Yeah, and
coming down to the wire, as you said. Okay.
Yeah, it's really coming down to the wire, and it's at this point, a person like me is not going to sway one way or the other. Both candidates, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, are not going to change their mind.
Okay. So you're set. You're saying that you're set. Yeah, go ahead.
So I got to put my conscience at ease and vote for the person I think best qualified to be president. I believe that's Jill Stein.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
And there are many, many more people who have your point of view, and there's many people who have Frank's point of view as well. That's why let's see if there's a third point of view. If not, we'll sign off for the night and we'll pick this up tomorrow. These days are going to be wonderful for discussion as we go through.
Going overtime on this.
You're welcome.
It's an important issue.
It is a very important issue. It is the issue of the day, in my view, because we're choosing the future of this country, our own country that we love so much. And it impacts the world tremendously because the United States is the big elephant in the room. It's the big enchilada in the world economy in many other ways. And we need to try to use our power more prudently, more compassionately, in my view, in the international arena. And that will be impacted by who becomes president as well. Thank you so much, Brett. Let me see if we'll hang up right now and see if I have someone else on the line, okay? Okay, folks, I'm back again after talking to two of our callers who are listening and had different points of view on how one should vote this time in the election, whether you should vote your conscience in whom you believe in, whether or not it's a major party candidate or not. And the other gentleman said it's too crucial an election to not vote for one of the two major candidates, that you're not voting for one of the major candidates may cause the wrong one to win, in his point of view. And he was a Hillary Clinton supporter. The second gentleman who said vote your conscience was a Jill Stein supporter. So I would love to hear from someone who supports Donald Trump. If someone's out there who'd like to talk about this, what's your position on the voting approach? So if you'd like to call, we can go on a little overtime for a few more minutes here if you'd like, for one more phone call. 562-438-0505. 562-438-0505, an area code, as I said, 562. So what we'll do is if no one calls here in the next couple of minutes or so, we're going to go ahead and finish up our show tonight and then pick up tomorrow where we left off and continue with these issues. And you can also bring up some new issue positions you'd like to see made clear about these candidates' positions, and not just the presidential candidates. What about Congress? The other major important branch of government with the Supreme Court is the third branch. Congress is actually written about in Article 1 of our Constitution. It was the first branch written about, and for the first 100 years of our history, Congress was the dominant branch. Only in the 1920s did the presidency come to dominate, and there are many reasons for that, which we can talk about subsequently as well. But right now, we've got an election coming up for Congress. From the House of Representatives, we have all 435 voting members up for re-election. The House is not dominated by the Republicans. They're the majority party in the House. In the Senate, the Republicans are the majority party, and 1/3 of the Senate, 34 senators, are being either re-elected or defeated. They're up for election right now, 34 senators, because the Senate has a staggered election system where 1/3 of the Senate is elected every 2 years for 6-year terms. So even there's a chance that the Democrats might win over the Senate this time around, the way things are going. We'll see, though. This is just predictions based on polling, and polling is only a snapshot in time. Things can change. You can have people come out and vote who weren't even expected to vote. One thing is Donald Trump has been exciting and getting a lot of people involved with passion on his side who never voted before. And some people who are actually Democrats are crossing over and voting for him on the Republican side. The blue-collar Democrats have lost their jobs. Many of them have gone over to vote for Trump or are going over. So we have to look at some of these things very carefully in a sophisticated way and look at the details. So since no one else is calling in, we're going to go ahead and sign off here in a few seconds. I want to say thank you so much for your time, and we'll pick up tomorrow again at 7 o'clock from 7 to 7:30. Let all your friends know they can call in from 7:15 to 7:30, okay? Thank you so much and good night. See you tomorrow.